Okay, questions or comments from readings or anything else? Hearing none? I think this is where we left off, yes?
I think so.
Yeah. All right. If you understand that addiction is a goal-oriented behavior, it's a goal-oriented behavior. So the question is what the goal is, and that's going to vary according to the person and the mode that they're using. So as a sector of society, when this slide is referring to basically the stuff that we've encountered in this setting, so whether on the left column it's like performance enhancement, stress relief, entertainment, exploration, or the addictive search, basically can explain all of those in a sentence. Performance enhancement will depend, for example, there's a new thing on the website I talked about with the kid who committed suicide based on his experience or overuse or prescriptive use of ADHD drugs, amphetamine class stuff. Basically, people at the extreme end feel that they can't really perform or study adequately without these things. And so that's the performance enhancement piece with that particular class of drug, certainly not the only one. Stress relief, well, it depends on how you like to relieve your stress. A lot of that could be like pot and alcohol, but it could be other things. Entertainment, pot and alcohol, depends. Entertainment could be also a lack of social skills, could be covering that up. Because, can you have fun without using? And can you have fun without using with your previously using crowd? Do you have anything to say? I mean, without having your consciousness changed externally. So one of the things, I don't necessarily recommend this for obvious reasons, because if you're in recovery and you need to stay away from shaky persons, places, or things, but if you have enough inner strength to resist, go to one of your former hangouts or a hangout where people are using and see what the level of conversation is like. There has been a social recon done like that. Yeah. Huh? It is entertaining. And it's sobering when you consider that you used to do that for fun and consider that fun. And they're not really having a conversation that's deep anyway.
Usually they are in this situation.
Okay. Depends. I've seen it happen both ways, but you could also have a deep conversation without it too. So that's a matter of skill and practice. Exploration and the addictive search kind of go together. There is a theory from about the 80s or 90s that talked about, they explicitly refer to the addictive search, and it's basically something feels missing, and drugs or alcohol or other addictive practices are the most popular means, so you try that. But they don't necessarily fill the emptiness or fill the hole. Well, they might fill the hole, but it's not necessarily adequate. So when we talk about ingestive, those are ingestive addictions, things you take into your body, including food. Process addictions, which are things you do with your mind and body. Polyaddictions is not addiction to plastic. It's basically mixing the first two. And some things actually do. So, for example, television, thinking of TV as the plugged-in drug, television also reinforces ingestive addictions, particularly when you look at the Super Bowl and beer commercials and Doritos and all that other kind of stuff, where essentially if you think about food as a drug, and the things that are comfort foods are literally essentially just drugs. They're not nutritive. So anything fried is essentially worthless. You just destroyed all the vitamins. There might be some mineral content in there, but essentially, like in the case of like French fries or potato chips, you've just converted it to entirely sugar using starch. Adding salt, salt's a drug in that sense, so sugar and salt are comfort foods. Not much nutritive value. Same thing with candy or sugar. The reason sugar works is biologically a teaspoon of sugar will turn off your cortisol response. Cortisol is one stress hormone, but it only takes a teaspoon to do it. If you understand that a teaspoon of sugar has 20 calories and you look at your average soft drink, okay, and there's 140, 160, so under what circumstance would you eat 7 teaspoons of sugar all in a row? And watch out for sugar substitutes like aspartame, Splenda. That was a rat poison, an insecticide, literally, that simply got repurposed. Basically, the sweet smell attracted insects. They ate it. It killed them.
Isn't it like the same thing as embalming fluid too?
I've heard that. Not sure. I've heard that, but it's an insecticide. So.
This has aspartame in it.
Uh-huh.
Is it a diet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's quite often used in foods, in
directly
so-called
linked to
diet foods. Okay. So the sugar substitute, yeah. So you have less calories, but you're ingesting a substance that also has secondary effects towards the goal that you're ostensibly trying to, like people dropping calories so they have weight loss, but this stuff actually causes you to gain weight.
Because like they were saying, that people that make diet sodas and alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
they're gonna lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
The alcohol gets into your system faster by drinking a diet soda.
Hmm.
And
Somehow that wouldn't surprise me at all.
so they're
Water is better. Mo better, yeah.
Is there any support for aspartame being linked to weight gain?
Aspartame?
Yeah.
Aspartame? Yeah.
Aspartame.
Yes.
seriously.
Seriously, yeah.
Well, I knew
New York
that-
Times article, last time we delivered this class. I don't have it on your site, but yes, I've seen that. Look it up. Google it. Not everything's true on the internet, but you could look at that, see what kind of scientific study's been done. But certainly the corporate history of that particular substance, it was used as an insecticide, and then how it became a food additive is interesting in terms of looking at the politics of how that is, and who, you don't have to attribute evil intent to Dick Cheney or any of those folks, or Rumsfeld or whoever, but, check it out. That's all I'm saying. Cross addictions is not addiction to Christianity. It is basically the idea just from drugs in a certain drug class will develop tolerance for each other, cross tolerance. Cross addictions is that certain environments will develop an addictive tolerance for other forms of addiction.
Like meth and gambling?
Yes, right, like meth and gambling, like a casino. Okay, there's a reason why they have no windows, no clocks, cheap booze, and cheap food.
And bright lights.
And bright lights,
And you smoke inside.
and you can smoke inside. Yes. Okay, so a lot of times we have to look at that. I mean, that's why, social recon is teaching you the skill of looking at the environment, because the environment is not passive. It's designed to achieve a certain effect. Okay? So internet addictions is a new and emerging field as to what constitutes an addiction. I get that question all the time. How do I know when it's bad? How do I know when it's a problem? And if you basically kind of import the DSM criteria between abuse and dependence, that's somewhat of a guide. I don't know if 5, which is coming out in a couple of months, basically is looking at cyber addiction. But I can say if somebody's playing World of Warcraft 8 to 10 hours a day and they ain't getting paid, like I know people who work for World of Warcraft. So they're getting paid, right? But if you ain't getting paid and you're spending, for example, 12 hours, developing your avatar to sell it, which, is illegal from the point of view of the World of Warcraft folks, then basically what you're doing is, because I ran into this, a client said, well, how bad is too bad? Because my boyfriend's using my computer to build up his avatar. He's not doing any other work. It took him 3 months to develop this avatar to a certain level, and he could sell it for $1,500. Well, okay, 3 months, let's just do the math. $500 a month, that's less than $1 an hour. Really? And it took you 3 months to do that? Right, great. So you get $1,500 in a lump sum from some sucker. Great. That's an addiction. Sorry. You're spending more time, as much time as you would be in a real job, and you're not getting paid, it's an addiction. If it's affecting your life, your relationships, etc., it's an addiction. If you have to lie about it, it's probably an addictive process. Induce ignorance, that's my concept, the idea that, okay, you trust people that you probably shouldn't trust. And they're legal businesses. And the reason they stay profitable is that you don't know, you don't think of alcohol as a drug. You don't think in terms of doses. So they sell you addictive doses at an early age. And, there's a slide in here later on that basically talks about menthol cigarettes as being more addictive and harder to quit. Right? How many people know that? Oh, well, right. And, who do they target? Menthol cigarettes too. So minority populations, and even, you can see this even reinforced in prison. Okay, where white guys won't smoke a menthol cigarette because it's I'll use the polite, politically correct term, it's an African-American brand, even though Newport and Salem aren't, African-American brands. So, and then the issue of what does relapse and recovery look like if there's not exactly a physical withdrawal? Okay, so one of the things that happens with net-based addictions is what makes them addicting, and kind of like cross-tolerant between, like, say meth and gambling, is you have that rush. You have that hyper-intense thing that all of a sudden, when you're not doing it, you have a letdown. Okay? Even though it's not a drug substance, you're hyping yourself in terms of your nervous system. So you're inducing a bipolar state. Yeah.
Isn't gambling the only, last year I took psychopharmacology, and Ginny Solom told me that there was gambling, and it's been labeled an actual disease. It's the only disease, only addiction you can actually be in processing, you can actually be engaging with without being in front of it. You can be sitting in group and you get the same by thinking about it. Like with drugs, you have to ingest them. But gambling, you can literally think about it, and it can fire the receptors and the serotonin levels and everything else just.
It's not the only one, but it is one. Basically, in how that works, if you guys understand what we're talking about, the individual nerve cell cannot tell the difference between a real event and an imagined one. So it reacts just the same. So you don't actually have to be physically engaged in the process. You can just be thinking about it or anticipating it, and you get the same reaction physically in terms of the neurotransmitters and all that.
She talked about how when she was a gambling professional
Yeah.
too, and when she would go into group, she would literally have to use the group dynamic in a different way than you would when you deal with alcohol and drug
Right.
addicts, because to keep away from the active relapse in your own head. It's
Right.
different dynamics.
Yes. Yeah, that's not the only thing that we're dealing with in that arena, but it's the one that we have the most agreement of because we developed. It's kind of like we're going to probably develop that same model for internet addictions, but that's probably about 10 years away. I mean, the way the field goes, yeah. All right. So as an example, with ingestive addictions, using the data from LCC Recovery Center. So ingestive is things you take into your body, also known as substance abuse, eating disorders, and certainly certain socially promoted addictions that largely I've referred to them as induced ignorance addictions, whatever. Prevalence and order of mention at the recovery center depends on the time of year, what's happening in local underground economy market conditions, alcohol, marijuana, heroin, methamphetamine. Spice was mentioned recently this week. And then people come to us for recovery support, cultural adjustment. Now, cultural adjustment can be things like you're coming from a stressful environment into this even more stressful environment. So whether that's combat or prison, which is a form of combat, or coming to Oregon from being someplace that's more populated, or coming here, people have mentioned all kinds of different things, the whole culture of higher ed. Right, if you haven't been to school since 10th grade, and 10th grade was 15 years ago, writing math 10 is going to be a stretch. Oh, wow, somebody told me today, I can't remember multiplication tables. And I'm 42. How do I get through that? How do I even do it? Geometry I can visualize, but multiplication tables, that's stressful, right? So people are adjusting culturally for a variety of cultures, and so notice that I've also used the word culture outside of race and ethnicity. Okay? So environments are cultural. Tobacco cessation, we get club drugs, eating disorders, and overeating as well, and cyber addictions and combinations of these. So, some of the factors that we have in ingestive addiction that we talk about in the science. So if this happened to appear on a midterm in your near future, you would know about it. All right, so 1, genetic predisposition. This is only proven to the degree that it's proven with alcohol. I'm not saying it ain't proven, but the gold standard for science is you have to have replicated longitudinal studies. That longitudinal meaning like 10 to 20 years, and then the original experiment duplicated independently by somebody else. So replication is the big thing in science. Can you reproduce the experiment? So if we replicated the experiment twice or more, we can say it as fact. All right? So with alcohol, genetic predisposition, the gold standard is usually the Scandinavian double-blind twin studies for male and female twins. Okay, so alcoholic kids with parents who are alcoholic, who are raised in non-alcoholic foster homes, do they develop alcoholism at rates higher than you'd expect with random chance or in the quote-unquote non-alcoholic population? Yes, they do. Independent of environment. So what this means is, what it probably means is essentially it's tolerance, because we haven't isolated an alcoholic gene. In fact, it isn't a single gene. It's more likely to be a complex of them acting in concert. Now, we've only proven this with alcohol.
Type 2?
With what?
Is this type 2 you're talking about here? This reference? Type 2 disposition?
Yeah. So basically what you're inheriting is a greater tolerance for alcohol. Now, whether this can be imported to other drugs, so for example, people will ask, well, what about marijuana, et cetera? Okay, well, we've got rat studies. We've got, we don't have very good human data.
Refuse to study it in the U.S.
Well, yeah, you can't study an illegal drug in the US. So what we have on marijuana is from, it's all over the map. So people say, oh, low birth weight, later cognitive deficits. Again, it's all over the map. How harmful is it in pregnancy? Depending on which DHS office you go with, they might like it, or they might, like you to go into treatment and take your kid away for smoking pot, or they'll ignore it. Either way. So, again, the science is all over the map. So,
You mentioned about the DHS office. I have a friend of mine, his daughter recently got in a car accident, and she went to the hospital. There's 2 kids in the car, and she had she gave a hot urine test.
yeah, for pot?
For meth.
For meth.
And they opened a case, but there's been nothing charged, no DUI, and it's kind of like, well, how does that work?
Yeah, right.
The DHS office, like you said.
Yeah, right.
Politics.
From a policy point of view, it shouldn't, we should be consistent or aim for consistency.
Especially around something like that.
Yeah, you would think, but. Second factor in ingestive addiction is behavioral environmental. So behavioral part is basically the behavior is modeled around you as a coping skill. And 2, it's available in your environment. So when we also look at environmental focused prevention, then we look at, for example, things like alcohol outlet density. More liquor stores or alcohol outlets in your neighborhood, the higher chances you are going to have access to alcohol. And here's another piece which, was brought to my attention because some of you if you consume hip hop, there's a cough syrup song by Young and Giant. Anyway, so one of the people, I work with at the college, basically cough syrup. Cough syrup. Well, how does that work? Well, it's simple. Basically, opiates, as a side effect, suppress the cough reaction in the brain. And, for example, Bayer Laboratories made over-the-counter heroin available in cough syrup in the early 19th and 20th century. So
Was it codeine also originally?
No, it was heroin, glycoheroin in over-the-counter cough syrup. Right? We didn't have a concept of addiction then, right? So to this day, we still have opiate-related substances, and some are prescription cough syrup and some are over-the-counter. Now, back in those days, they're thinking you're only taking a teaspoon, and what they're going to preserve it with, if it's an organic material, they're going to preserve it with alcohol, just like tinctures, right? So if you're taking a tablespoon dose, the alcohol preservative is not enough to interact significantly, i.e. potentiating, that is multiplying the effect of the opiates. Obviously, if you drank, say, a screwdriver and OxyContins, you're dangerously coming close to stopping your breathing because of the potentiating effect, right? So most people at the therapeutic dose of cough syrup, that's not going to affect you. But if you consider that cough syrup has up to 40% alcohol, and you're drinking half a bottle, that would be significant. Yeah.
The fact that it contains alcohol, is that why you have to show your daily diet sometimes? I can't remember which one it is, but there's one.
Sometimes, yeah. I've never heard of that, but there would be places where you could a kid could walk into a store and get over-the-counter
I
cough
thought
syrup.
there was one time I went in, and I think somebody had just actually was using it to make meth or something. I can't remember what it was. It was like a big news story.
Yeah,
After that-
pseudoephedrine, is a
and
precursor.
After that, I went into Walmart, and I had to show my ID just to get the thing of cough syrup.
Yeah. All right, let's see. So behavioral, environmental, and then the addictive potential of the subject. So substance. So for example, there is no genetic predisposition for crack cocaine. Too new in the genome, relatively speaking, right? But we can basically see how addictive that particular substance would be. And if it's in your environment or you can access it, then boom, there it is. So that basically is where is the drug active in the brain reward system, the nucleus accumbens. We didn't talk about that in that slide. For example, a slide that basically showed where marijuana was active in the brain.
We saw a slide where it looked like marijuana looked like a neurotransmitter.
Mm-hmm.
But you just said nucleus.
Okay.
Below on that or something.
Accumbens. This isn't in that one.
I figured out it's a bad idea to try to navigate your videos using YouTube. Use the links.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh?
You said I have like pages and pages and
Yeah.
pages, but I just like, print 'em off
Sorry
into parts.
about that.
Some of them are hard to print though, because they're colors, so I.
Oh yeah,
they're really
always
hard to-
select black and white as the default,
Okay.
and that'll help.
Yeah, because I was doing the grayscale,
Yeah,
and they don't print very good.
no, black and white's cleaner. These little tricks.
I just use software called Orange.
Okay, so for example, in this slide from NIDA, so strictly speaking, there is no THC receptor, it's an anandamide receptor. And anandamide isn't slotting basically THC isn't slotting completely in the receptor, it's too big a molecule. So it's actually, and this particular relationship, the actual relationship is you have the cell wall, which is made up of atoms, and essentially the molecule is interfacing directly in and around the receptor. So where it does that, where it lodges, basically makes that cell membrane unable to take in nutrients. All right, so wherever that happens, if the cell is unable to take in nutrients, you can cause a decrease in cellular efficiency as much as 30%. Now, hold that. Okay, so with this, right? So on the left, lower left, you have anandamide, the brain's chemical, the neurotransmitter that was discovered by the Israeli team in 1991. And on the right, you have THC. So you can see it's slightly bigger, considerably bigger, actually. And on the top slide, this is where anandamide works in the brain by itself, right? So you have coordination of movement, you have vision, sensation, movement, judgment, memory formation, pain, all those different things, and then the reward center, which is basically, it's called the nucleus accumbens. All right? So the way the nucleus accumbens works, I see you. The way the nucleus accumbens works, okay, is that all survival-related behavior has to be repeated for survival, right? So you're thirsty, you drink. Ah. You're hungry, you eat. Ah. Have to go to the bathroom? Ah. Orgasm? Ah. Right? So it gets repeated, right? So there are certain neurotransmitters like dopamine that are associated with that and make it powerful. So what happens when you have a more powerful stimulus than the natural one, like in cocaine, like crack cocaine, which radio-tagged crack cocaine when they tested people with brain, using and radio-tagged the cocaine so they could see where it went in the brain. It went directly to the nucleus accumbens, the reward center. So cocaine is essentially basically saying, oh, all your survival needs are taken care of. You don't need anything else. And it really so it becomes even more powerful than most of your things, most of your survival things. So that's why you can neglect, your, physical needs in children and all that kind of stuff. You can basically, as a side effect, cocaine also, if you're female, causes you to ovulate more. So you get pregnant if you use crack. And so it can also prematurely induce labor. So, those stories of women delivering babies in the toilet and then going right back to think of what how would that even happen naturally? It wouldn't. The maternal instinct would kick in. So this is powerful enough to override all those things. So what makes something addictive is basically, does it ring that reward system, the nucleus accumbens times, boom, and boom, marijuana does that, of course.
Is it numb the fight or flight concept, or is that the old?
Different pathway, that's norepinephrine.
Or brain, right?
Yeah, it could, but, that's better achieved through another one. So when I was talking about the nucleus accumbens, there. So crack rings that. So you and then you.
Okay, I have heard and seen it talked about many different times that our brain produces its own cannabinoids.
Yes, anandamide.
Anandamide.
It's not a cannabinoid.
Okay.
Okay?
Well,
Cannabinoids.
it's more than one.
Yes. Sure. The one that we most identified is anandamide.
Okay.
There may be others.
I'm mostly interested in CBD.
Yeah. CBD is a cannabinoid, though.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't know what its analog is.
The CBD is quite interesting in what it's able to do
Yeah.
chemically.
Yeah, so, like the other slide that showed with, the DNA, right? All DNA-based forms of life do this. Essentially create chemicals for different purposes. So the cannabinoid is basically antifungal. Just a section of one, THC, resembles anandamide. There are probably others, right? Because anandamide is involved with all these different areas, so it stands to reason one of the cannabinoids, like CBD, would slot more into the pain receptors than others, right? Because you're getting all of them at once when you ingest.
Yeah, as far as my understanding, there's no way to separate which ones you're getting.
Right. Not at the moment.
I wish they would really medically look at CBD alone.
Yes. I know.
So you said that THC was temporarily compromising the cells by like 30%? Is that
Yeah.
right? So I know that
As
they
far
say
as
that
we can tell.
THC is they prescribe marijuana for glaucoma. And
Yes,
you can see
right.
Clearly, it's working in that vision cortex of the brain.
Right.
Now, if it's compromising those cells, how is it helping?
So there's compromise and there's compromise, right? So to say that it may, because what's happening is you're not using all of it, right? So it builds up. And because of osmosis, there's more, lodging in the cell. The reason it's lodging in the cell wall is because it isn't being excreted because it takes a month to process the last dose, right? So 30% drop in efficiency in a stomach acid cell, you're not going to notice. Memory formation, you might notice that. I've had clients that were heavy smokers so it is true, this is true, okay, that THC drops testosterone down to the low level of normal. That's true. Okay? But that doesn't mean that men will grow breasts and start lactating. Okay? But it might mean that, and I did see this in a person who was a heavy smoker. He was 23 before he started growing a beard when he stopped smoking. Okay, so, not growing a beard because I'm a heavy pot smoker. Is that, well, people don't understand, okay, what that means. Yeah, he was still sexually active. Not growing a beard, what's so bad about that? Well, We don't know. I mean, that's a dramatic shift. Now, is that going to be used by the anti-drug people? You might not grow a beard. No, I mean, well, you know, you'll grow tits. We don't know enough because we haven't studied it, and we can't study an illegal drug. And when we do get studies, it's from overseas, and you know, this is why I was able to basically say, okay, marijuana is an addictive drug, and the reason I can say that is because the overseas databases described a withdrawal syndrome. Right?
So how can you prescribe it, knowing that not
Because, okay, so remember also, marijuana, cannabis products were legal drugs used by all the major drug companies that are in existence today, up until the 30s. But the technology at the time was basically, you know, alcohol tinctures. So you essentially make a tea, preserve it with alcohol, prescribe it for a variety of complaints, including nausea, anti-cancer stuff. But they weren't able to do the chemical work and say, okay, there's THC, there's CBD, there's THZ, right. 420 different cannabinoids or whatever. Well, what does that mean? Well, that just means it's specific to that plant. But what does it do? And how does it fit in the body system? We don't know. Because remember, we've only found anandamide since 1991.
So they're just making it basically. They're seeing the results they can get right now, and
Yeah.
it's going with that. They don't even care about the long term because we can't study it.
It can be studied elsewhere. So, I mean, here's the thing that I just read in the Register Guard, so it must be true. This part is true, okay? One of our legislators, partnering with a Republican from somewhere else, is basically pushing a bill through to begin looking at, okay, let's tax marijuana. Yeah, so if you're a grower, you have to pay $500 a year or something like that, right? If you're registered. And so they're expecting to raise $20 billion from that. So part of that goes to law enforcement, part of it goes to treatment. Basically following along, so you're gonna reschedule it from Schedule 1 to like 3 or something like that. So part of it goes to law enforcement, money goes to law enforcement, part of it goes to treatment, part of it goes to research.
So are they talking about legalizing it or?
Moving it farther down on the schedule.
Okay, so how can they tax an illegal substance?
Now, if you move it down on the schedule, like Schedule 3, you're in effect legalizing it.
Okay.
It's still a controlled substance.
Being up here, so is OxyContin.
Yeah, well,
But it's legal under prescription orders.
right. So, part of your question, all right, there's a risk-benefit ratio to drugs.
Yeah.
There is. That's already part of the calculus.
Pharmaceutical drug, no matter what, not
Right.
even just, street drugs, but
Yeah. There's a risk-benefit ratio. So, okay, me personally, so yeah, as a result of type 2 diabetes, being African American, I mean, as my eye doctor said, okay, I got glaucoma, right? So marijuana doesn't control the eye pressure
Yeah.
in me,
Yeah.
all right? So I take Lumigan drops. That dropped it dramatically within, treatable.
What are the side effects of that?
It's 2 drops in your eye. Oh, yeah, right.
Okay.
I ain't going blind.
Yeah. I just got diagnosed with glaucoma, and somebody suggested
Yeah.
I get my green card, and I was like, that's stupid. I don't want to smoke.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
But there's always, I'm just wondering what it is that they are considering a health benefit. Because, I understand that kind of stuff for nausea when you're, in cancer treatment and stuff like that. I mean, it's a totally different scenario. But to say that, they're just handing out these prescriptions for something they don't really understand
Right.
what they're doing, and
You've hit it exactly. Hit the nail on the head exactly. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that's what we're doing with, all pharmaceuticals. Oh, well, the side effects are too bad. Here, try another one.